Should we each have mics or share? Okay, grab a mic from in front of you, folks. Okay. Everyone okay? Okay. Thank you all so much for being here, for sharing your work. I think we should start just with some introductions. Just tell us who you are and maybe which project was yours. Maybe a brief description reminder for folks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Darren Dominique Heroux, and I'm the director of Texas Switch.
We might have a... Now it's on, yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Julia Yeswick, and I directed Mauritania, the last one.
Everybody, my name is Raymond Brea, and I directed Augmentation.
Hi, I'm Robin. I directed Sokai Japanese.
I guess I'll just put out a general sort of thought or question for y'all that maybe you can respond to, and then we'll open it up there in the audience. But I guess in putting together the program, was thinking a lot about articulating a sense of self through fragments and through, I think, Julia, from your film, I tried to write it down. A slow separation of one body, making the self discrete in space and time, and that idea of tracing a line, curves, and etching it deeper with each pass, and just sort of thinking about looking to the past and then like into the future too, thinking about ourselves as harbingers of the future. So maybe just if you want to respond to that, and if you feel any relationship to that idea in terms of your project, and if not, then you can just tell us how you do feel about your project. Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the festival. It's been a wonderful experience so far. The ability to catch all these wonderful films that otherwise may not find a home. The creation has been wonderful, the networking opportunities as well. So thank you to the Nemesis team. This film is, it was kind of born out of a lot of frustrations that I had as a commercial documentary filmmaker. And so there's some kind of conventional elements to it, like the sit-down interview, which is one that I typically hate to engage in. And at the time I made this film, I actually had pneumonia, and I was working on 2 other projects. So this one was like on the back burner. I had to really finish it quickly. I think there was only 30 minutes of rough footage total. So that's like a 3-to-1 ratio. So really, when you saw a cut, it's because the camera shook, essentially. So I tried to add some elements of play to it, but also some ambiguity. Yeah, so I think referring to the fracturing aspect of it, the Texas switch is a film technique where oftentimes a performer is substituted by someone else, but it's an invisible substitution. Happens through blocking or camera movement. So the audience never sees the substitution happen. This film obviously is a little bit different. It's very obvious, but it's the person you don't see that sells the scene. It's the person jumping out of the window that sells it. The person playing the musical instrument that sells it. And I think the invisible presence of her name is Rachel, but she wanted to be known as Anonymous. She kind of sells the documentary as well. And I'll just maybe end it by saying everyone in the film I have close connections to. And that's partly because of just the time issues. My mom is the first one that appears. She's making the coffee. My next door neighbor who gives us leftovers every evening, she's next. Then it's my son-in-law's grandmother, Rochelle, family friend. My dog is in it. And my son makes an appearance. He's the one, you see him, it's the back of him at the end in that shot, the dog in the window. He's wearing a cardigan and a wig. And I guess there was one thing I want to mention. I'm going to pass on because I don't want to take up too much time.
Okay, so your original prompt was about thinking about tracing a line and past and present and future together, kind of. So I think that was largely what I was working with in this piece, and for me, what I was really kind of grappling with was trying to, so the you that I was referring to in the voiceover was just like an unnamed maternal ancestor. And I was really trying to think about why we don't have, or I at least don't know as much about my maternal ancestors as I do as the ones that you can trace through last names, through the patrilineal. And so I was kind of trying to imagine who they were and what they would think of where I've landed and where the family has come through all these years, and then having children of my own, thinking about how they might relate to those things. But really trying to also, formally in the film, I was trying to think a lot about lines and circles and how here we are working in a linear medium that does in a lot of ways not have the flexibility of being a circle. But I was playing with that formally a lot and trying to think about how a lot of the ways in which patriarchal colonial settler societies also have a lot of linearity to them, and sort of what gets left out in that. And when stories get told linearly, when even we just think of time in this linear way, like what are all the things that sort of become invisible in a way, and to think about how all of the matrilines radiating out to us almost in a circular way as well, get lost a lot because we don't, if we live in a patrilineal society, we don't trace them through the same way. And so I was thinking a lot about that and what it means to kind of return or to try to follow the circle back in a way, while always sort of moving forward, because obviously we can't go back in time. But I was playing a lot formally with that as well because I shot on Super 8, almost entirely on Super 8. There was some 16, and then there's a few like AI generated images of my ancestors. This was like I used like a really early spin-off of Midjourney that I just typed in like Lebanese maternal ancestor. It was like, let's see what it spits out. And it was really ghoulish, but kind of interesting. So I kept them because I was like, I just thought they were sort of fascinating. And so I was playing also with, like, you see a part where my cell phone is sitting on the table and there's like images from the explosion that happened in Beirut in 2020. I was there in 2018, and the images are the same shots of the street that I had taken in 2018. And that's something a lot of people probably don't catch, but filming it with my Super 8 camera on a digital device that obviously didn't exist when that Super 8 camera was made was also like using some of those kinds of technological ways to kind of mess a little bit with time and place and thinking about past and future and present all together, and like how, even with like these formal devices, how I could kind of just try to break that a bit and explode that model and think of it in different ways. Yeah.
I've lost track of the question, I think. Can you say it
Maybe
again,
just
Sarah?
thinking about fragments, I guess.
Fragments. Yeah, so I, I mean, I have to say, I'm like kind of startled that Augmented is in this group of films, like on a lot of levels, but not in a bad way. I'm just interested about it because, the aspects of maternal line really do come out very strongly in the rest of the film. So there's an element of gender there. So I just find it interesting. And honestly, when I set out to make Augmented, there's a lot in the film that speaks about futurism, right? And, transhumanism and moving into a optimal new future. But it's not really about that. I mean, I feel like it's really set largely in the present moment, and not even the past so much, really in the sense that a lot of what Max is talking about, Max is here tonight, by the way, a lot of what I brought Max in to an interview to talk about is because Max, as a longer post-transition trans man, as am I, really has his ear to the ground as far as listening, being on gender critical right wing social media outlets. So is really able to speak to a lot of the present moment of what's going on. So I find it interesting, this whole topic about circling back. And just as an individual, I find it interesting, really interesting, and appreciate so many of the films here for talking about like the homeland or, tracing ancestry. Because I have another piece that speaks about gender transition as a form of immigration, which, and I made that a ways back, but really do believe in that sort of like old country, new country version of gender transition and like what you leave behind, what are new customs you have to get used to, what stays, can you genuinely leave everything behind? So that's like an entirely different subject for a different film. But I do feel like just watching the retracing going on along these films that, to my mind, my film stands out as really, it speaks about being in the future a lot, but to me, it feels like it's about a present moment. So
Thank you for that. I appreciate it so much. Hi. Okay, so the thought of fragments, I appreciate this question because it kind of it's making me realize, right, like most of my life sort of exists in fragments, and I live many lives all at the same time and have for a long time, and I think I spend a lot of my time trying to sense make of those pieces all the time, and I think gender is actually one of those things, and this is not something I usually talk about with some kind of Japanese, but my oldest kiddo and I always talk about how there's not a lot of queer cinema where queer is not a plot point. And while we value that storytelling, it's kind of a fragment that I really wanted I wanted to be present but not addressed. And I feel like there's a lot of that questioning that happens with the fragments, at least for my film. That I asked a lot of questions around what happens when I put these fragments together, when these pieces come together. What are they saying to each other? What emerges? And then how much of that do I say out loud? How much of it is for public consumption, and how much of it is frankly opportunity for commentary? So yeah, I appreciate the question.
Can I add something?
Of course.
Yeah, I also really just wanted to say thank you to the curators for being so thoughtful and careful in putting this program together. I thought it was really beautifully curated.
I'm going to add something else if you don't mind. So I mentioned to Raymond this morning that I've seen 3 short film programs so far, and each one almost feels like a feature-length doc, they almost feel like a piece. You know, even though there's 5 or 6, it feels like they're callbacks and visual and thematic. So it's a really wonderful curation.
Thank you. But y'all make it possible. Is there any questions out there? Or thoughts to share?
I'm going to pull rank.
Yes, Eric.
I apologize for the rant that I'm about to go on. Hopefully not too ranty. But Ray, I felt like your piece, for me, was the key to unlocking this program. Because I think that you could think that the program is about history, like how we came to be where we are and how we came to be who we are. But with Ray's film sort of in the middle there, I think it changes. It's not about history anymore. It's about kind of a radical present. And it's not about how we came to be who or where we are, but how we claim to be who or where we are. And I think that we rely on things outside of ourselves in order to claim ourselves in some way. Whether that's language, there are multiple pieces that used language to claim an identity or a self, whether that's medicine or medical technology to claim who we might be, whether that's a history or even just a photograph in Robin's piece, that the postcard, right, of the battleship that sort of allows you to lay claim to an identity in some way through this kind of external object. And I think that all of that, I mean, there are some folks who really roll their eyes at me when I say this because they say it all the time. But all of that, I think, is what like Stiegler or Derrida would call the pharmacon. It's like this pharmacological thing that we rely on to be human. That it's kind of a radically human act to claim ourselves through these external mechanisms, and to kind of claim our present every single moment that the present happens using these externalities. And I kind of felt that about all of these works to some extent. I mean, in particular, I mean, this interview subject who is not in the chair, who we know through the dissolving feather of a hair, right? That's how we come to know this person, through something radically different and outside. And that I think is, a program that was like a kind of a beautiful way, I think, to bring us to a present moment and teach us, almost like each one of you kind of taught us how to claim ourselves every single day. But I think that you then made these movies, which now are their own externalities, right? And that's really what I want to ask about, is like, what, when you make a movie, it felt to me like this was less an act of expression, as I defined mimesis on the opening night, and almost like more of the world pointing back in. Like these are almost like magnifying glasses that we can look through to see who you're claiming to be at any given moment, or at least in that moment. So I just wonder how you see the role of this kind of documentary making in establishing self, identity, difference, otherness, and we can maybe like teach us a little bit how we can do it too. Doesn't show us in here and makers, so it'd be great to learn. I'll just jump in and then you can come in. Were you going to say something, maybe? Were you going to say something?
No.
Okay. Well, part of what I was trying to grapple with is because when you work in a documentary, you're always searching for a subject. And when that's an individual, you kind of have to balance this extractive potential, this transactional potential. So in many ways, this documentary was a documentary in search of a subject. And it kind of subverts that aspect of it. And there were 2 lines. Most of what Rochelle said was actually her own thoughts. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to record her, is because when I would meet her, she would say the oddest things. And my first thought is, I got to get this recorded somehow. But she didn't want to be on camera, and so I needed to respect that aspect of it. But there were two lines that I had to read, and one was a group of filmmakers wanted to spend their summer at the beach, which was really what I wanted to do, but didn't know the story. And then the other line I added, that was more my own personal view, is nature is full of symbiotic relationships. Even parasites can help their host, much like how artists feed on their subjects. And that's something I've been grappling with, is this dynamic of it's really, and I don't necessarily think it's really come up necessarily so much in films I've seen. I can't really speak to it, but as a documentary filmmaker, this idea of otherness and of honoring those people in front of the camera is something I'm always conscious of. But at the same time, I've become somewhat cynical of it as well. And so I guess as far as it might inform my future practice, I'm kind of just taking a step back and not pointing towards others. I've done it for like 20 years, and it just doesn't feel as right anymore. I guess I could say from an ethical standpoint, because I know what I get out of the experience, but I never know exactly what the subjects do. And I'm here right now in Boulder, Colorado, speaking to an audience, but Rochelle is at home. You know what I mean? So I think it's really there's a bit of a convicting aspect to it that I'm kind of working through. I'll just.
So, Eric, thank you. That's incredibly interesting, and honestly, that's what I come to Mises for, is just be sparked by a question. There's always so much good stuff. Not just you always, but this happens with this audience. So, and I think I'll speak specifically about augmented because what you said when you say, that all of these films are about claiming who we are on film. There is like some hackles that go up on the back of my neck because, specifically around discussion around trans identity these days, there is so much that involves, are we claiming or are we just being? And what's the difference? Is there a difference? And if we are claiming, are we being deceptive about being? So all of that is stuff that we have to think about these days, really unfortunately. But, I hear that, and then also looking at this film and looking at other films that are being made here, I agree that even that's something that we're doing, that's something that I'm doing, is claiming on a certain level just by the act of putting it into a film. But yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I think the medical aspect of claiming the attachment of gender alignment to medical augmentation came about as a way of saying, like, why are these two things different? So in a sense, it was me not just claiming one narrow thing, which frankly a lot of trans film is doing these days. As far as I can see, a lot of what qualifies as trans film is about claiming transness, So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to ask a larger question, which does have to do with surgeries and who goes under the knife, why do people go under the knife, who gets to go under the knife, and then who gets to say what just happened, when people go under the knife, and who. So there's so many more questions about that comes up that are so far beyond the really traditional, transgender, I was miserable, I transitioned, everything's fine, and now I'm persecuted, and that story is out there over and over and over again. So, really wanted to like make something that asks questions. And a lot of the focus on X-rays, my own X-rays. I mean, I was really inspired by Akira Lippitt, wrote a book in which he talks about X-rays as an interesting form of photography and filmmaking, in the sense that they see the invisible. So, and I really feel that about film in general, especially about innovative film, experimental film, however you want to look at that. That when we're making films, we look at the invisible. We look at what's not on the surface. So, so I'm going on for too long, but this just interesting question. So.
I'll jump in here briefly. I think Eric has forced me into a few different thought experiments, for which I'm grateful. And one of them is how we're implicated in our work, right? I think that I'm of the camp that researchers are not separate from the things that they research, and even if they don't feel that their identity is implicated and that their positionality and where they're situated in their work, right? Even if they feel that they are separate somehow, I truly believe that they are not. And I think of filmmaking and documenting any kind of an impulse is the same or implicated in the same ways. So I appreciate that you're asking these questions, right, about what the line is between subject and cinematographer or documentarian or storyteller. And I don't think, right, that those lines in the dirt actually exist in any sort of like way that we don't actually create. So I always appreciate the opportunity to like dive into any project that I'm doing by not balancing where subjectivity and objectivity live, but like how much am I present in this work and why? What's fueling the questions I'm asking, where I'm putting the camera, and what I'm choosing to say, right? Like what I'm wanting people to hear.
I'm going to try and answer, but so many thoughts there. Yeah, thank you for your comment. Which part to start on? I mean, I come from a background of anthropology, so this work is very different for me, being a very personal film. When I have come up in multiple programs in schools that were very much like, we're going to teach you how to make ethnographic film, and then we're going to have a very light conversation about the subjectivity, objectivity, which I think has gotten critical over the years for sure. But I think with this one, I think what I mean to your point about claiming versus being, and to your point of like talking about how as a trans person needing to not have to say that you're claiming that this is right. This is. I think that's just so interesting and profound, because I think a lot of like what I was grappling with in this film, for me, it was made over a very long period of time, and my life was changing a lot, and only part of which was becoming a parent and having to deal with the sort of social scripts that get put onto us when we start to occupy roles that everyone else thinks they know and what that should look like. And so I actually went through many years of just being really angry, actually just being like, stop trying to put me in this box, right? Like we all contain multitudes. We're not just fragments necessarily pieced together, but like we all have these kinds of overlapping ways in which our identities are multiple things. And I think that, for me, trying to think about like also as someone who, like you, was raised with all of the white privilege possible, and then kind of in some ways claiming my Arab American identity or trying to find those connections. What I really found, I went to Beirut in 2018 for the first time, and it was actually like really kind of banal. Like I had two small children with me. When I returned, a friend said, "How was your trip to Beirut?" And I said, "Well, I found that like changing diapers in Beirut is just like changing diapers in Detroit." But I think that out of that, I think kind of what I was trying to poke at a lot in this film, it may be subtle, but was really trying to, poke holes in the ways that we let all of those things tell us that this is who we are or how we should be, right? Whether it's one's gender identity or ethnic heritage or a mom, or whatever that might be, right? And I think like what I was really trying to push at was like, I don't know, thinking about how if we sort of start to think of ourselves as, being able to define ourselves for ourselves and to see, again, I think it's sort of, in my mind, it's sort of like the difference between seeing a line and versus seeing like an expanding circle. That to me helps me think about, well, I do get to say, actually I do have some control over this in some ways, in saying like, these are parts of me that I want to amplify, or these are parts of me that I don't identify with, or that other people might put on me, but I can say, yeah, no thanks, like that's not who I am, or whatever. But I do think that when it comes to how the world perceives us too, that's also, I think a lot of the films were maybe grappling with that as well, like that disparity between how we get perceived versus how we are perceived versus how the world perceives us as invisible or not. And so I think film is a beautiful medium that we do get to sort of play with all of that with and challenge it. So
Julia, can I piggyback into this question and comment that I have, which you illustrated perfectly in your diapers are gender diapers is the same in Beirut, and I'm going to try to be succinct, though I'm excited. I think Andrea Long-Chu, who's writing, has become almost too popular, and she has made herself sort of target bait. I'm not sure if you know about her. She's a pop trans author at this point, but has written for the New York Times. Her most famous piece being "My New Vagina Won't Make Me Happy," and that's okay. And I think, not to place too heavy a hand on a pessimistic turn, but there is something very powerful that links these pieces, very much so in a way that you don't have to be happy to be, and you can also question whether the choices that brought you to this moment have made things better or worse for you, and you'll never know otherwise. And I think that's thinking about necessary pain relief surgery that comes with its own myriad of problems on its own. Wondering what your grandmother did or did not do to give you pain or pleasure, and not being able to anticipate the future is such a strong thread for me. Came up over and over, and I think about it even in the interview as well. The moment of change where in Texas Switch, where maybe I'm not invisible. Actually, I'm not. The more I'm talking about, and I'm feeling sort of an authorial sense. Maybe I'm here. That's a statement from me. My question is about object play, which all of you have these artifacts. Ray, I'm particularly interested in your dancing with collage, an overhead projector, or light table. What are you using, and your choices? And I think everyone is really key artifacts. I'm interested in them.
Yeah, thank you. And so yes, that is a light table with my camera pointing straight down. And I was actually talking to Darren about this earlier this morning because Augmented took me way too long to make. It took me 2 full years to make, and a large part of that was this invisible. So talk about X-rays. I went through a lot of invisible process steps. You know, like having. I originally had the X-rays in digital form from the hospital, and I had those blown up into like almost like billboard size. I mean, huge digital photographs, and then I took a still analog camera and re-photographed those, and then went into a dark room and made prints, and then put them on the light table. So there was like a lot of back and forth and process that I think was known only to me, you know. So also invisible, but the animation, excuse me, into my voice. The animation in augmented is also personal in the sense that I those collage pieces are collage pieces that I've carried around with me like since whatever, like the 1980s. You know, I've just had those collage pieces in a box that
Or images. Yeah.
yeah, they're just images. I think animators do this sometimes, you know, like just collect images, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it someday. So, but you know, I finally got the light table and pointed the camera down. It was like, okay, this is what I do with images. Like these images are part of my life. Like literally, they've been through countless moves all over the place. So that's really the story of the light table. But yeah, that is light table. And also, I appreciate your take on this because yes, clearly, you know, this type of spinal surgery comes along with chronic pain. You know, so and I appreciate you linking everything together about not having these outcomes. That,
Yeah, not being able to know in advance, and even then. you know.
Anyway, thank you.
So,
Just speak quickly about substitution
Mhm.
and objects. Part of the challenge was how do you fill the screen when you don't see the character, although I realized in hindsight it wasn't really such a big challenge. I saw this essayistic film from, I guess it's the 80s, it's called After Steve. I'm not sure if it's well known, but it's basically this woman in an apartment just talking about her life, and you never see her, and she never leaves her apartment. And so there's faucets and stoves, and she'll look out the window. That was actually quite inspiring because it kept my attention for 70 minutes, and you saw no one, just objects. And so I kind of used that film After Steve as a bit of a template. And there's some real objects that then show up later on as artificial. So you have a rabbit in the beginning and a heron, and then you see them later on in kind of statuesque forms. And so there's a doubling. All of the cameras that you see are toy cameras. None of them are functioning. The one that's doing the interview is a Pixel Vision 2000, which is the one where you could record with audio cassettes. And I was so there's a bit of a kind of a play on artifice as well that comes into it. So substitutions and standing in objects. And initially I wanted to ask Rochelle if she had a photograph of her cockatiel, because that was my instinct, was to be very literal with how to approach it. And she hadn't, in a bit of a down state, she had destroyed all of her photographs. She was in a bit of a bad place. She had nothing. And so that's how that cockatiel treatment came about, was just for a lack of actual tangible physical objectification, so to speak. So
Trying to think of the objects that are hubcaps component. That was in, there's this really amazing store in Detroit called Hot Wheel City that's just all hubcaps. And I filmed that a long time ago because I was just fascinated by them. Because they're all chrome and shiny and pretty. But I think, yeah, it's interesting because when I think about the objects that show up in the film and the fact that I was collecting this footage and audio for, I don't know, the better part of a decade, some of it.
when I put it together, it's only when you put it together, right, that you then start to see the relationships between the things. So it's not like I went out and I was like, oh, I've got to film a bunch of circles and film the hubcaps and the carousel. It was just that those are the things that got pulled out of the collection of stuff that sort of started to make some sense in this film. Or the orange on the floor that was rotting, that then felt like this ball that I found this young boy holding in an old archival video that was like illustrating how the planets move. And, you know, suddenly I was like, oh, it's that orange. He's got the orange in his hand, you know. But I think, yeah, I mean, for me, it was really a kind of subtractive process that I came to use a lot of the shapes and objects that landed in the films. Yeah.
Oh yes, and I'm really thinking about your AI generated family members as well. And the imaginary objects.
You're all going to go home and do this, right?
I think I might have noticed it. There was one that was really almost ghastly.
Oh,
looking.
yeah.
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 I had a question.
Yeah, some of them were really creepy. Yeah.
I think the way that you shoot sometimes too, like you're doing a lot of single framing or stutter shooting, like in short bursts. I mean, that type of that approach to me always sort of highlights film as an object, right? Like it doesn't really allow us to forget that these are single frames that we're watching, and I guess just that sort of again, like fragmentary focus for me as I was watching those pieces visually through your film. I think, yeah, we should wrap it up. This has been a really lovely conversation. Thank you all again for joining.
Thank you.
Please feel free to keep talking to them, of course, out and about their projects. And please come back for we have a screening at 8 o'clock. So hopefully we'll see you then.